This is Group 12's management interview recap. We're each going to go over our main takeaways from our interviews that we conducted, starting with Adam.
One thing that was learned through performing our interviews was the importance of what managers focus on. People often think that managers focus on performance metrics, production, and profit. This is understandable because this is often how we judge a manager's performance. We look at what the data tells us, and that data is full of different metrics and measurements that inform us about the performance of the manager. This is also in line with older views of management that had little focus on employees. However, this does not seem to be the reality of management today. We found that most managers realize greater success in organizational performance by focusing on their employees. One of the interviews I performed illustrated this point perfectly. I interviewed an individual who has 10 plus years of industry experience, but has only been a supervisor for 3 years. He also has no formal management education. He stated that in his first year as a supervisor, his focus was on metrics. The metrics determined his appraisals and ultimately his raise and bonus. Therefore, those metrics had his focus. He communicated the metrics to his employees, gave them updates, and did everything he could to ensure he made his metrics. At year's end, he made very few of his metrics. The next year, he changed his tactic. He stated that he mentioned the metrics twice to his employees, once at the beginning of the year and once about halfway through the year. Aside from that, his sole focus was on making sure his employees had everything they needed to succeed. He stated that the employees were his main focus, and he just tried to remove roadblocks that would get in the way of them performing their job. He stated that that year he made every single metric. We found this to be true in our other interviews as well. Some individuals had formal management education and knew all the terms. They had been taught the value of focusing on employees before officially becoming people leaders. But even the older retired people leaders who didn't have a formal education had realized the importance of being people focused. Regardless of the terms used or what learning path was taken, one of the major things we learned through our interviews was it is better for people leaders to be more people focused than it is for leaders to be metrics focused. After all, they are people leaders, not metrics leaders. Dylan?
So I found fascinating, also building on kind of a focus on people, that across all the people I interviewed, the question to what is your greatest challenge as a manager was consistently getting a diverse group of people to be on the same page and strive towards the same goal. This was due to a number of factors, such as age groups with generational differences and values. It could be experience levels where newer employees are pushing for more progressive thoughts or rapid changes in the way that things are done, whereas those more experienced people have established traditional processes that they're very hard to budge on. And then it also boiled down to communication styles, where some people in a group setting would be quiet and passive, and they would have to try and coax thoughts out of them, whereas other people are just more blunt and straightforward. Those could lead to misunderstandings where people are feeling judged or attacked just by the very nature that some people communicate. On the line of communicating as well, people have different strengths of opinions, and so it's hard to get a diverse group of people to agree on one thing when you have one person pushing an unpopular opinion, but they push it much stronger than the group's weaker pushing of a less well-supported opinion. And what was interesting about this is, despite having the same problem, despite experiencing the same issues, each person had their own distinct method for dealing with it. My first interview had a manager that essentially did it the most heavy-handed of all of them. He would just make the decision and then go about bringing the team on board, relying on his knowledge of their trade to explain to them why he believed it was best and why the team needed to kind of get behind him so that they could go forward. The second interview had a manager that I believe did it very well, with a group discussion. He ensured that all of his employees were able to have a say in the decision being made. They would move towards a final solution, and then when it ultimately came down to it, he would just make the call for the group. And so this has the benefit of allowing everyone to feel as if they have input and control over the path of their group, while not falling into that pandering where you're just sitting and stagnating because you can't get everybody on the same page. At some point, the manager just makes the call and they move forward. And he noted that it was very important to have established referent power in advance, because when he goes about and makes these relationships with all his employees, once it comes to that decision time, they are confident that he has their best interests in mind, and so they're much, much quicker to come on board with those. And then the final manager kind of went about it in a way that works for his specific group. He likes to have just a complete group discussion, and they will butt heads and discuss and kind of fight it out until they reach a majority at the very minimum, if not full group agreement. And his role in that is pretty much as an interpreter or a mediator to kind of bridge those differences, kind of equalize those communication styles. And I think this works great in small groups, but in large groups, you're going to fall into that pandering where it just takes forever to make any kind of decision. Overall, I believe that these different solutions, these different kind of methods for managing a diverse group can be applied to a variety of scenarios, and we can learn something from each one. Caitlin?
One thing that I noticed throughout all of my interviews is that different management styles are often used with different personalities. Every single manager that I interviewed admitted to using a different style with each person. My first interview, she really went into making sure that she gets to know each of her employees on an interpersonal level. That way she knows the best way to praise them, the best way to correct them. And I've watched those results really work for her just in the short time that I've known her. And definitely adapting a management style to better fit the person that you are correcting or helping. You are more likely to get the intended results, and definitely interview number one proved that through and through. And then going on to my next slide, that really reiterates that. The different approaches for different personalities. More introverted employees, like praising in private. Interview number one, she talked a lot about her introvert. She's a very extroverted woman, and she knows that that can be kind of overwhelming for people who are more introverted. And she talked about taking more time to get to know those people on an interpersonal level, to know what is okay to do in a more public setting and what they would prefer to have in private. My third interview, she is a more introverted manager. So a lot of her things were more of a private based reward system and communication system, which can kind of bother some extroverted personalities. A lot of extroverts like that public praise. They like the collaborations. My second interview, it was a whole lot of extroverts at a car wash, and getting all of those people to actually do their job. They like the public praise. They like to know that they're doing good. And then depending on the person, like really getting to know them, you can use those styles and tactics interchangeably. Like I know personally as an introvert, I like the private praise, but once my manager lets me know in private, I'm okay with the like public recognition, but it it very much so depends on how it's approached, and getting to know your employees on that interpersonal level really, really makes it possible for you to create loyal employees and employees that want to come talk to you and want to do you well. And then John.
So across the interviews, I found that money does not equal motivation. Where money is important to people, it's really not what people work for. I'm just going to play this video. I think it answers to this quite a bit. When you talk about motivation, what really motivates people?
For some folks, motivation is money related, but it's not the be all end all that we found. We usually find that if people are doing things that they like to do on a regular basis, then they'll continue to do that. Being paid fairly works well. We're certainly not looking to underpay people, but if we pay them fairly and they're doing things that they like to do, then they're going to continue to do that and continue to grow.
Because I feel like money, no matter how much of a raise you get, you always just want more money. Like titles, you always want to get another title anyway. But I think motivation just truly has to come from within.
So you can see that while money is important, money can be a short-term reward, and it might only lead to someone lasting a year or two if they're in fact perhaps overpaid to bring them on board. And then, as we saw in our Google leadership case, people who are well paid will still leave for job satisfaction and to see the fruits of their labors in a different way if they're not getting that in the current position. So developing skills and preparing people for responsibility will motivate people to a greater extent versus simply relying on money as a reward. And lastly, we looked at leadership and the role of leadership and team building and across industries. You can see from this slide, whether it's the automobile industry, medical devices industry, or the energy software industry, team building is important. The members of the team have to understand that their managers and leaders are really in this together with them. One person said you have to inspire them by your own actions, and you can be their teammate. It's important for people to understand that their managers are not throwing them out there to just do a job. And another person said, I try to be an inclusive leader. And I thought that was an interesting expression, an inclusive leader, where he wants to listen to the input of his people that he's leading and not just simply making decisions for them. And then in another industry, they use everything from Clifton-based strength activities to outside activities to really build the team and help people to get to know one another, especially when you're working in multiple teams, but trying to accomplish the same goal and getting these people to really know each other. So building the team is very important to managing the overall organization. Dylan?
So in conclusion, we had quite a few takeaways from all of our different interviews. We looked into what matters most, weighing people versus metrics, finding that when we invest our time in our people, most of the time our metrics are going to work out as well. We found that a large portion of managers deem diversity and getting people on the same page to be their most difficult task as well, or rather, while finding multiple solutions to being able to actually do that. We looked into the importance of interpersonal communication with our employees so that we can feel out for their personalities and adjust our management styles accordingly so that they feel the most valued and the most motivated. Speaking of motivation, we looked into money versus intrinsic motivation, seeing that when we pay people fairly, if we ensure that they enjoy what they're doing, we're going to get greater results out of them than if we just continue paying them more. Finally, looking at leadership and team building as an additional motivator, seeing ourselves as leaders that are a part of the team and investing ourselves into increasing that sense of team amongst our employees will ultimately have a greater effect than just trying to pay them more. With all of these, I believe that we've found a lot of fantastic tidbits to increase our efficiency and our effectiveness as leaders and as managers. This has been Group 12's presentation. Thank you for listening.